This is Dish and Dirt with Gary Pickren, South Carolina's only podcast dedicated to the real estate agent craft. And now, the host of Dish and Dirt, Gary Pickren.
And greetings and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Dish and Dirt. I'm your often opinionated but rarely wrong host, Gary Pickren, coming to you from the beautiful downtown Columbia, South Carolina offices of Blair, Cato, Pickering, Castleline, the third week of November 2025. Before we begin today, a quick reminder that next week is Thanksgiving, and as much as I know you would love to listen to me on Thanksgiving Day for 30 minutes, it's probably better that you spend your time with your family discussing politics, religion, and money. That would be a much better topic for you to have than to be listening to me for 30 minutes. So y'all go ahead and have all those easy conversations on Thanksgiving. Save me for next week. I'll be off next week, obviously, and then we'll be back again the following week with another episode of Dish and Dirt. Now, today I am very happy to have one of my very good friends, Tony Nalley, from ERA Wilder Realty. He's here to discuss his company's decision to end broker-to-broker compensation. And what he's going to do today is talk about why they made the change, how they rolled the change out, how the marketplace reacted to it, and how it's going today. My hope is that other brokers will hear this and decide that this is a move worth taking. A lot of them have, and I'm very happy to see that. And individual agents might also decide, even though my company still does broker-to-broker comp, I don't want to do it anymore, and I'm going to start changing. The bottom line is, I believe, as Tony believes, broker-to-broker needs to end by 2026. Now, Tony is the vice president of brokerage operation at ERA Wilder Realty. He has been in real estate for about 25 years. He serves as the broker in charge of his own brokerage in Little Mountain before he moved to ERA. He has also served on the consolidated MLS board of directors since 2012 and has served as its president. Now, Tony is a Clemson graduate, so that's one of the things we hold against him. And he and his wife, Michelle, are very good friends of mine, as well as our entire firm. Tony, thank you so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you on.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Gary. Always great to be with you, and you do a good job of making me sound a lot more important than I really am.
Well, except for the Clemson part.
Except for the Clemson part, absolutely.
Well, neither one of us have a lot to say about Clemson or Carolina football these days, so I guess we'll just talk about broker-to-broker comp. That would be a better idea. Really pleased when I heard that ERA Wilder Realty had made that decision to stop doing broker-to-broker comp and to move to the model that I had been advocating since the Sitzer Burnett case, which is let the parties decide. Let the buyer decide, let the seller decide if the buyer wants compensation and if the seller wants to contribute to that. What first prompted y'all at Wilder to reevaluate the compensation model and to ultimately decide to end automatic broker-to-broker compensation?
Well, it wasn't a decision that we made quickly. It wasn't a decision that we made lightly. Our leadership team, Eddie Wilder, obviously our founder and president, Lucinda Brasington, our chief operating officer, myself, we talked about it a lot. And I actually talked to some broker friends of mine around the marketplace and kind of got their thoughts on it. And one thing that kept coming back to our minds was that it was clear coming out of the law, our industry needed to be more transparent and more straightforward with our clients. You know, it never did kind of sit well with me as far as how the commissions worked, and we're sharing it, and one broker is promising pay to the other broker, but yet when you get to the closing table, none of that was there. It was all being paid by usually the seller. You know, that just seemed like a little bit of a shell game, and it was hard to explain to the clients. And we said, look, we're going through this change in our industry. Why don't we use this opportunity for us to kind of practice what we preach, and let's be more straightforward with our clients. And we talked about how it would be received by our agents, whether or not we may be kind of out there on that limb by ourselves. That's why I really wanted to talk to some of broker friends of mine that ran their own companies around the marketplace, found out that we were not going to be out there by ourselves. So, you know, we're not quite there as far as getting all brokers converted over, but we kind of see a few more converts every week. At first, when we first did this, I had a lot of agents and a lot of broker owners, managers calling me, asking me basically the same question that you're asking me now. Why are y'all doing this? And how are you doing this? And I was glad to communicate with them on how we implemented it and how it was going. And it continues to go very well, I think.
And I think a lot of brokers are making this choice now. We're seeing it more every day. It started with y'all and EXP and Next Home. And every day it seems like I'm getting an email from a small brokerage saying, I heard your podcast. I agree. I'm no longer doing it. And what they're all telling me is the same thing that I think you're going to tell us today, is that one of the better decisions you made.
It is, you know, I don't often get my way in real estate. I'm kind of like you. I often opinionated, but rarely wrong. I hope I got that tagline
You
right.
got it
Is that
right.
right?
You got it right.
There's some other changes. I think you agree with this. I believe that just like commercial contracts and just like new construction contracts, I think the commission ought to be right there in the contract between the buyer and the seller. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are paying the commission. So what better place to have it in the contract? We're not quite there yet, but we're working toward that. But this was once we talked about it and we kind of said, all right, we know there's going to be a little bit of pushback from agents because at the end of the day, agents don't like change. And this was a major change for them, especially at the kitchen table. And so we had to work through how we were going to roll it out, how we were going to help our agents understand that this was an opportunity for them, especially those agents that were good at articulating and demonstrating their value. So those agents, they leaned into it quickly and they have flourished in this environment.
Absolutely. Was the fear of new lawsuits also something y'all talked about? Because one of the things I constantly preach on, I don't think this is over. I think there's more lawsuits out. And if you look at one of the things that I believe will ultimately come to our unraveling again is Catchmark keeps saying that they did not like the fact that the listing agent was in control of the buyer's agent commission under the previous system. Under the new system, if we're still doing broker to broker, while it's a little bit different because there still has to be an agreement between the buyer and seller, it's the listing agent saying, "This is what I'm offering."
Absolutely, and I don't know if it was so much of a fear of lawsuits. I think lawsuits are inevitable, whether they have merit, whether they don't have merit. It's just part of our business, and you're going to have to deal with them and defend them. But in this case, I believe that it's always a good thing to be open and transparent with our clients. I think that should be at the root of our value proposition to our clients is that we're going to be open, honest, transparent with them. And this was a case in a very big part of the transaction. How much commission, who's paying this commission, that's a huge part of our deal there. So being able to be open and transparent with our clients, it was an opportunity that we saw that we had to go down because we don't get this opportunity very often. The lawsuits brought about a lot of tough things, but one thing they did bring about was an opportunity to kind of change the way we do business, either on the individual brokerage level or on the industry wide level, and be more transparent with our clients. And I think that's the best protection that we can have against meaningful lawsuits that actually have merit.
I was just literally talking at Remax Summit. I want to say a shout out to Remax Summit and Sumter today for hosting me. And that's exactly what
No,
I said to them. So, hey, Remax. I always throw a free plug when anybody has me speak, right? I said the same thing to them. I said that in the end of the day, we're going to look back at Sitzer Burnett as a positive because it did allow us to change. And the change that I liked that you said that exactly ERA Wilder Realty recognized was transparency for the consumer was the winning way to go. Absolutely winning.
100%. 100%. And you mentioned something earlier that I had several of our agents say to me is say, hallelujah, I'm tired of the listing agent and the seller determining my value. So they actually saw it as a win and they saw it as a way that they could truly get paid their value in the transaction. So we had a really nice group of agents that said, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, that's an interesting topic. Well, I'm kind of go off on a tangent here for one second. And I think you really hit a nail on the head. We have spent so much time in this industry learning how to explain our value as listing agents. I mean, every agent who's ever gone through real estate school has gone through a class on how to do a listing, how to explain a listing, how to go over everything. But we spent so little time and effort doing it on the buyer side, how to explain to the buyer. And for so many years, I don't think there was ever the quote unquote need to, because we would just tell the buyer's agent, don't worry, I'm going to get the commission over here from the seller. It doesn't really matter. So what I get and what he pays me is not really none of your concern. Now we're having to realize, no, we need to explain what our value is to the buyer. And by God, we have a lot of value to buyers. I mean, nobody wants to buy a house on their own. It is not a fun process. You have to have somebody navigate you through it.
No, 100%. Have training our agents or retraining our agents that exactly the way that they build and the demonstration of their value on the listing side, we had to kind of mirror that on the buyer side. And that's where we focused our training on was making sure our agents were prepared to sit down with that buyer and explain the process to them, explain their value to them, and explain that that's a commissionable process that they are going into, that they are buying a service no different than buying a service from an accountant, buying a service from a lawyer. Here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's what I'm not going to do for you. And here's my fee for doing it. That's something that some agents had never had to have before. Because like you said, heck, in our old buyer agency agreement, we had a box on there that said, we'll get our commission from the seller. It was an easy deal. We didn't even have to worry about it. It was a big change for a lot of folks, especially those agents that concentrate on the buyer side.
And unfortunately, that box, along with the fact that we could sort under the MLS based on commission rates, is ultimately what led to the Sitzer Burnett lawsuit. The fact that we were saying that the seller's paying it, you don't have to pay it. And oh, by the way, I get to navigate you or steer you, but like a better word, to a house based on how much I'm going to make on the deal. It was a big problem with it. But let's spend a few minutes. I do want to talk a little bit more about your agents, buyers, and sellers with the reaction. So you said that your top agents that already knew what their value was, they embraced this. Did you have a portion or a small group of agents who didn't like this idea from first? And where do they stand today on it?
Well, I don't know if they didn't like it. They were apprehensive about it. We've never sat down and said, hey, you need to build a buyer presentation. You need to work on your buyer consultation before you ever go take them out to show houses. And you need to be able to get comfortable, just like you look the seller in the eye and say, this is my fee for doing this for you. You've got to get comfortable looking at that buyer and say, this is my fee for doing this for you. Now, there is a possibility that the seller may be willing to pay some or all of this. And if they do, beautiful. But if they don't, this is still my fee for doing this. That was different for some agents. And we had to make sure that we had the training and the coaching and the support for those agents to get them over it. But, where we're at now, because we're almost a year removed from the lawsuit. Yeah, I think the comfort level, the learning curve, like it is for a lot of agents on things that are new, was very steep. Uncomfortable on the first one, felt better on the second one, and an old pro with it by the third one.
Well, the average age of a typical real estate agent is 58 years old. I'm now 56 years old, and I can tell you, I don't like change any more than anybody else does. But unfortunately, as Eddie Andel told me one time, if you're not changing your business and what you're doing in your marketing every 2 or 3 years, you're already 2 to 3 years behind. It is something that we have to do. And whether we like it or not, you and I have been in real estate long enough to recognize the major changes in real estate. We were still using fax machines when I first got in. Text messages didn't exist. Emails was something you checked once a day. Y'all used to meet at the Waffle House to trade contracts. There wasn't instantaneous emails back and forth. We didn't have the internet. And everybody complained the internet will be the death of real estate agents. The internet was actually the greatest thing ever to happen to the real estate industry. Nobody likes change, but dang it, it sometimes works out good for us.
Yeah, and everybody said when this thing came about and this whole thing about not doing shared commission, that it was going to erode commissions. It was going to erode commissions on the sell side, erode commissions on the buy side. And, that's just not what we've seen. Not from a market standpoint, not from our company standpoint. We've seen a slight, and when I say slight, a couple basis points jump in list side commissions and maybe a slight erosion, couple basis points on the buy side. And the whole wash of it is they're about where they were year and a half ago.
Back in the day when you're doing broker to broker comp and the broker said, well, this is what we're offering you. If it wasn't what you were asking from your buyer, then that's just all you got, right? Because like you said, we check the box and I'll get my comp from the seller. Now, because agents know how to explain their worth as a buyer's agent, just like they do as a listing agent, buyers are paying the difference. I see it as a closing attorney. We'll see where a seller's paying the large majority of the commission for the buyer's agent, and there may be another $500,000 that the buyer still owes. And I've never sat at a closing table and had anybody complain about it. We pay for people as long as we feel there's value in it. When you don't believe there's value in it, I don't want to pay for it. But so when agents do a good job explaining value, I think that makes a difference.
Well, you're like I am, that we look at a lot of settlement statements every month. And, of course, we see both sides of it. And every month since we started this thing, I've seen an increase in the buyers paying either all or a portion of their commission. And that used to be absolutely unheard of. We used to never see that. So you're right. If it's explained properly from the very beginning of the relationship, it's a much easier path, because as long as they are getting value and perceiving value, they're willing to pay for it.
Absolutely. Well, how did your buyers and your sellers respond when you first rolled this out? Was it hard for them to grasp it, or was it because y'all had done a good job training your agents, they were able to explain it so they could?
I think that what I thought was going to happen and what I'm hearing from our agents is exactly what has happened out there. The old way was actually harder to explain to sellers. Let
Yeah,
me get this right. I'm promising to pay you, but you're going to promise to split half with some unknown brokerage over here,
you've
and we
done
don't
nothing and
even
brought
know
me an offer.
whether their offer is going to be good or not. But whether it is, if I accept it, half of this money's going to them. But yet when we got to the settlement statement, none of that was true. The seller was paying it all. So from the seller standpoint, the seller, what the reaction that I'm hearing from the agents is the sellers are saying, that makes a lot more sense. I can understand that. That's more straightforward. I get it. I don't necessarily have to pay the buyer's brokerage commission. We'll wait and see what they ask for. I can go ahead and throw a number out there if I want to. Don't have to. That's more common sense. That's a more simplistic way of doing it for the sellers. From a buyer standpoint, like you said, some buyers are understanding that they're getting value, that they're buying a service and they're willing to pay for it. And we still get the pushback because some people have, this is their 8th transaction and the first time they've ever been spoken to by a buyer's agent about, hey, you may actually have to pay some of this. So, that's part of it. But we work through all those situations. The real hard part for us is that when we are on the buy side representing the buyer, we're basically having to choose to go down 2 paths. And we have to find out kind of which side of the fence that listing agent is on. That tells us what comp agreement to use, what kind of language to use back to the buyer. So we have to quickly figure out which side of the track we're playing on from a buyer standpoint.
That's why the world would be a whole lot easier if everybody just got rid of broker to broker comp and went this route. To me, this is the route that's going to happen, whether people want it or not. Brokers can say, well, we're always going to do broker to broker comp. I don't see it. I don't see it being around. All it takes is Anywhere or Compass or somebody like that to say we're out. And it's just going to push even more people out of it.
Large company that's combined Anywhere and Compass were to say that would, hypothetically speaking.
Right. If that goes through, if it goes through, which probably will. Did you have any pushback from other agents or other brokers that made y'all have to stop what you're doing and go and deal with it? Any bad examples of that happened at first? Or?
No, we've heard all kind of things from agents, complaining to us, agents saying to our agents, that's illegal. You can't do that. The broker calling and saying that's illegal. That's against the rules. That's unethical. All sorts of things out there. And we expected that. And that's fine. Well, we have those conversations and kind of enlighten them on where we're at and that we're all above board doing this. And maybe they should look into it. And we've had a few converts by those calls coming in.
Well, I think if you're a broker, before you call another broker telling them something's illegal and against the rules and against the ethics, you might want to actually check to make sure that's actually true and realize that actually the way that they're doing is probably the more consumer friendly and more compliant way of doing it than broker to broker. I don't think, to me, from a fiduciary duty standpoint, I don't know how broker to broker exists. I assume y'all didn't have any agents who just didn't want to deal with it and left the brokerage. So for my brokers that are considering it and afraid that it will cost them agents, did you see any of that experience?
No, we did not have a single agent say, I'm leaving if you're going to make me do it this way. They bought into the training, they bought into the idea, and almost to an agent after they had sat at a couple kitchen tables with those listing clients, they kind of said, this is easier to explain. This is easier for the seller to understand, and it's easier for us to conduct this business this way than the old way.
So the world didn't end as everybody predicted it would. That's
It
amazing.
didn't, and kudos to our agents. They were apprehensive about it, but everybody was on edge back then with all
Right.
the changes that were
Nobody
going
knew.
on. And here we come, piling this on, and now we got to learn a whole new way of doing it, whole new way of filling out listing agreements. And I will tell you this, Gary, that one of the biggest helps was the contract that you drew up. I think it was originally for the consolidated multiple listing service, but kudos to you. You also drew up a statewide version or a generic version, and that contract made it much easier for us to explain to our agents and for our agents to explain to the seller. We didn't have to cross anything out. We didn't have to X anything out of the state contract. It was much more straightforward and easier to understand. So thank you for doing that.
And that was a listing agreement. Yeah, the listing
Yes.
agreement I did for you guys. And I'm happy to share that with anybody if that's okay with you. That's I appreciate y'all letting me do that and giving me those parameters to draft it under. Since you've moved to this model, have you seen some success stories? And I want to share one that I got from a broker in North Carolina. Remember, I'm not even in North Carolina, but I have a lot of North Carolina listeners up there. And this comes from the western part of North Carolina. Jason, he said, we saved our sellers tens of thousands of dollars this year. We have asked buyers lower than our 3%. We've also had many ask for 2 or 2.5. Had we been doing it the old way, we'd have always recommended to our seller to offer 3%. So the way I see it, we have saved them a good bit of money that would have never happened. Just this week, we closed a deal where the buyer paid their own agent and didn't request any other transaction. We saved our seller $23,000. So when you start thinking of it from a seller standpoint and a fiduciary duty to your seller, why again would I go out and tell everybody I'm set to give you 3%, regardless what you are asking or offering to me before you even give me an offer? So are you seeing success stories? Has anybody told you of saving money for clients like this?
100%. And it's not just, we've gone to a non-commission sharing model. We've gone one step further. And the training that we've given our agents is to give the advice to the seller that if they are willing to pay a buyer's commission, that's great. That's fine. That's their decision, but not to predetermine what that amount is. And we go through a little role play in some of our training where one agent is the buyer agent, one agent is the listing agent. The listing agent is having this conversation with the seller. And, if they say, are you okay with me advertising 3% being paid to the buyer broker? Because that was the tendency at first. Let's go ahead and get this number out here. We don't want your house to not be competitive out there and
Right.
all those sorts of
I
things.
remember those days.
Yeah. So we went through that role play, and then in the role play, the buyer's agent has signed a 2.5% buyer's agency compensation agreement. So now they're bringing that in, and we asked during the training, what on that compensation agreement that they're going to present to the seller, what number do you think they're going to put on there? It's going to be 2.5 if that's what they have, unless the seller and their agent have been waving the banner saying, hey, we'll pay you 3%. I know what you say about altering the buyer agency agreement. I get it. But in reality, that compensation agreement is probably going to come over at 3%. If the seller and their agent have been waving the banner saying 3%, and that's costing the seller money. It's causing the seller to pay more money than they need to. Also, like, what the agents are telling me, one of the things they really like is telling the seller that they can base their compensation, if any, on the quality of the offer. And, that really, really resonates with the seller, because how many times before in the old way did we say, you would hear a seller say, I don't mind going down to that price, but I, really kind of stuck on having to pay this guy for bringing me this less than stellar offer.
Yeah, and really what we're talking about is it's about the net sheet. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what we
absolutely.
really should be looking at. What is the net to the seller? Is the seller happy with the net? If they're not happy with the net, there's two places they can change that net: the commission, the price. That's simple. One of the things we need to look at is we have to kind of change with the settlement. And I think that when we got into this, we never looked at it as being, I'm a buyer, I might not need my commission to be paid. And so when you have a broker to broker compensation model, it's making the assumption that the buyer's agent is always going to ask and always wants that commission. If I'm paying cash for my house, do I need to ask you to pay my commission? Maybe not. If I'm buying $1.5 million house on Lake Murray, do I need you to pay my commission? Well, if I can afford $1.5 million house, I probably can pay my own commission. The point being is it allows buyer agents to structure better offers when they're not having to ask for commission. The problem we've gotten into for 30 years, in my opinion, is we just are doing it the same way every single transaction. For example, how do we always do loans? It's always 30-year. We never looked back and see whether 15-year was better. We never looked and asked the consumer whether an adjustable arm, which arms aren't good right now, but 10 years ago, they were great. We just automatically put people in a 30-year mortgage, knowing that they were going to move in 3 years. Why not put them in adjustable rate? So I think that's one of the things that we really need to start looking at is how do we now take it to that next level?
Yeah, man, we had that exact scenario recently. 7-figure house on Lake Murray. We had the buyer paying cash, exactly like you just said, multiple offer situation, and our guy won. Even though he wasn't the highest offer, he was the highest net because he was not asking the seller to pay anything at all. And our agent came back to us and said, man, this thing's working like a charm. This is a great thing.
So basically what you're telling me is your policy has really increased your brokerage's competitiveness in the market, hasn't decreased it at all.
I
Okay.
think that anything that allows our agents to defend their value and it puts us in a position that we can be more transparent with our clients, I think that's a good thing all the way around.
And it puts the consumers in control. The seller is now in control of making their own decision. and they can't be mad about their own decision. They made the decision, not you. So I really like it. What
I do
advice would
too.
you give a broker in charge who's considering making this change?
I think that, the best advice would be to kind of circle the names on the list of the top 20% of the agents in the company and just go have a conversation with them and say that I'm I'm thinking about this change. Here's some pros and here's some cons that I see. Let them have input from the beginning. Let them hear what their concerns are about it. I think that'll be a kind of a good gauge on how much pushback you're going to get if you choose to go that route. If it's explained right, because most of the people that are in that top 20% are going to lean into the fact that, hey, if I have an opportunity to have me set my value in the deal and me defend my value rather than having some unknown listing agent set my value, give me some more of that. I'm all for that.
Let's raise Sitzer Burnett. I come out today and say the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled the Sitzer Burnett case invalid. Nothing within the settlement goes. You're free to go back to the way where you were. Still happy with doing the way you're doing compensation, not doing broker to broker, or would you immediately go back to broker to broker?
It would be difficult if the compensation was back on the MLS and guaranteed and backed up or policed by the MLS, because that's really was the glue that kind of held that system together. When you take away that glue, that guarantee, at the end of the day, and I'm going to be as frank as I know how to be with you, one of the parts of the decision was, you know, we're happily competing with a lot of people in the market, but there's some brokerages out there, just making this up, Jim's Brokerage and Tax Service down on the corner. We would rather have the promise from the seller than that brokerage. And, I hate to say it that way, but that's the truth. We're more comfortable with a direct written promise from the seller to pay the brokerage commission than having to chase some broker that we don't know, we don't have a relationship with. So that's part of it. So, but to answer your question, if the magic wand was waved, then we went back. It would be difficult if we also return to guaranteed compensation stated on the MLS.
Where do you see this going in the next 2 to 3 years? I think it's going away. I think dual agency is going to be on the chopping block, and I think broker to broker will be on the chopping block. And, the Realtor Associations has made a lot of changes, which we'll get into in a week or so from now. But I could see these being some models that go away at some point.
Well, I've heard you, say that about dual agency, and I don't want to put you on the spot because of your position on the commission. But I would hope that there would be a way that we could find a way to live with designated agency where
Right.
we
I
are
agree with that.
clearly indicated. Okay. So yeah, pure dual agency, I get it. There's probably some inherent problems in that. Designated agency is the preferred way if there are truly two agents involved there. So, I could probably live with that, but I hope that, the lawmakers and the commission would not throw everything away there and still allow for, big brokerage. I brokered 3 offices. So that brings a lot of agents under that umbrella that would fall under dual agents. And, some of these agents don't even know each other or not in the same office. They just happen to have the same broker in charge.
I'm all for designated agency. I mentioned that today at the meeting I had as well. My problem is when I'm representing both the buyer and the seller, and I make the joke, it's hard to remain loyal and not pick one over the other. I mean, even your parents like you or your sibling better, and you just got to decide whether you're the favorite of your parents or your sibling is. Right now, I think I might be the favorite. It's my birthday today, so I feel like I'm probably the favorite of my parents right now, but it's just almost impossible. But when you have a designated agent and another for the buyer and a designated agent for the seller, I think that's fine. I think that's something that's on the chopping block. I also think that broker to broker hopefully will continue its slow death. I hope it'll speed up. But thanks to people like you and Eddie Wilder, who is a titan in this industry, he's Hall of Fame, if I might add that. He was in the Realtor Hall of Fame. Was it last year or year before last he was inducted?
I think
So
it's
it's good to
before
see. It's good to see guys like y'all and EXP and Next Home and a lot of the smaller brokerages also going to this model. If a broker wants to talk to you about your experiences, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure, they're welcome to call me. My number is 803-920-3040. Real easy to remember, 920-3040. Be happy to talk with you.
Fantastic. Well, Tony, you've always been a big help, not only in real estate, but on the MLS board as well. And I appreciate your time today. And hopefully this gave a lot of good ideas for agents and brokers to consider getting away from broker to broker.
So you indicated you were over with REMAX Summit in Sumter. I'm sure the fact that you have on a Coyote golf shirt is just purely coincidental now.
Absolutely, 100%. It has nothing to do with Talmadge and me playing golf. Nothing at all. Talmadge's a great guy. Yes, good catch. Good catch. Great golf course, by the way.
It
All right,
is.
guys. Well, that's all the time we have for our show today. I hope you will come back again next week or actually week after next for another episode of Dish and Dirt. Please like us, subscribe to us, and share us. Thank you again, and come back again next week. Take care, everyone.